Thanks again for everybody for coming. My name is Keith Owens, co-founder of Detroit Stories Quarterly, together with Dr. Robert McTyre, who is with me on my right, and also Cornelius Fortune, who's not able to be with us tonight. He's at a writers' conference. We also have with us Marsalis, one of our featured writers in our current edition. He's also done another piece for us earlier, and he'll be reading from his work tonight. For those who are not familiar, Detroit Stories Quarterly, this is our 4th year of publication, and we will keep on going indefinitely. We publish, as the title indicates, quarterly, and we focus primarily on science fiction, fantasy, horror, and alternative fiction, but we also have straight fiction. And speaking of that, we have another one of our great authors in the audience, Dr. John Telford,
Yes.
who's written several pieces for us, and great pieces, and he's written several pieces for us. And what we try to do with Detroit Stories Quarterly is basically to look at Detroit from another lens, and also we look at Detroit from another lens. And in terms of, you hear a lot of stories about Detroit, what Detroit is, what Detroit isn't, and oftentimes you can't really see. Sometimes the best way to see something is through an alternative lens, and so that's the way that we try to present Detroit Stories Quarterly. But before I go any further, I definitely want to thank people here at Book Suey. They're our favorite bookstore. They've been having our publication pretty much since we started, and have been supporting us through the entire time. And have been having our quarterly readings here. Every time we have a new publication come out, we get a chance to do a reading. Of course, everybody was suspended throughout COVID, so this is our first reading back after COVID. So thanks again so much for having us back, and this is great to be here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McTyre for a few words, and then we'll get started with the reading.
Thank you, Keith. Wow. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm really appreciative of this opportunity. Book Suey, we thank you guys so much. You have given us a space that, honestly, when I think about it, I don't think it could come in any other form than us being able to speak to people in this way and reading our work is just unique and very special. Thank you so much. I do want to become a community supporter, by the way, so my wife is in the audience and she'll remind me, keep me honest to make sure I do that. Okay, so before I get going here, because I'll be the first reader, I do want to let everyone know that Detroit Stories Quarterly has been the winner of the 2022 Black Authors Matter Award. Okay, and thank you. This is our current edition, and it was mentioned, it's prominent right here on the top. And by the way, our books are clearly, please purchase them from here. They are available on Amazon, but that's secondary. Come, please support Book Suey by all means. But I also draw your attention to this because this is the cover that you see here. This is one of the unique pieces about Detroit Stories Quarterly. Outside of just our stories and what have you, we have a wonderful artist who does these covers, and they always capture the real essence of our topics whenever for every issue. And I just want to make sure I pronounce his name properly so that he's correct. Jay Holiday. He's the founder of our logo and all of that. He does a wonderful job. All we have to do is give him an idea about what's going to be in our issue, and he always nails it. And Cornelius is our facilitator, or our other co-founder, who has helped keep that relationship with Jay with us, and that's really appreciated. All right, so my story, what's in this particular edition is part of a series of stories that I started right after we started Detroit Stories Quarterly. And the title of it is The Adventures of TT and Tess, Detroit's Teen Tech Detectives. Yes, and if it sounds like, a little animation, Scooby-Doo is what came to mind for Keith when I first pitched it to him. I was thinking about the Hardy Boys, which was, that was a series I read and I loved it, got me into reading, but it was also great that, young people can do detective stuff and come up with things. And so I captured that. The name TT comes from my beloved wife who's here in the audience. Those who know my wife, she is literally a tech. She's the one that got all of our family involved in tech. She introduced me to Windows 95, and my life has never. Because I was resistant on her. I said, we don't need that, and I'll never forget it. I opened it up, and I was like, Carmela, look what it can do. So, all right. Well, I want to be conscious of the time. We certainly want to have some time for questions after. So I'll just give you a brief. You can read the series. This current one is a standalone. My previous ones, the first one was a 3-part, the next one was a 4-part. The first one was building the story. These young ladies, they are sisters, Tanya, Tamaro, and Tesseract Adelsworth. Tesseract meaning she's the youngest one. And they're both really skilled in technology, but they also go to a school that supports that sort of thing. Their mom is a Detroit police detective in the cyber crimes, and dad he's a business owner in a startup a tech startup. And so their stories they kind of happen by accident, actually. It's never really determined, but something always comes along that changes things. And then they're off into an adventure. This particular one, the title of it, I draw it directly from science fiction lore. Some of you might have heard about Blade Runner, which Harrison Ford, he was the star of that movie. That movie comes from a book titled Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And it is that particular book that has kind of served as an inspiration for this story. The story deals with an autonomous vehicle that's running amok in northeast Detroit.
The mic went off.
Yeah.
Did the mic go out?
There we go. Good.
I'm trying to it's easier for you to read.
Okay. All right, so, and this autonomous vehicle is running amok in northeast Detroit, and the story opens with them having their first encounter with this autonomous vehicle. And just to get a little bit of, not to give too much away, the autonomous vehicle is actually a government weapon as being part of a General Motors project that's going on and all of that. A lot of intrigue in this, and but it gets started actually on the 4th of July in the backyard of their uncle. They're having just a typical family at a barbecue. And with that, I'll pick it up right at that point. TT is just kind of observing the whole situation. She's watching, her uncle and dad. They're having a ribs cook-off, and they're being competitive. She's watching her mom and aunts. They're playing Uno attack, and her sister is getting her butt whooped on chess, playing with a good friend of theirs. And so I'll pick it up right at that point. So the dads, they were reminiscing. So as they reminisced, Mom, Aunt Ellen, and some other relatives sat at a long picnic table, engrossed in playing Uno. And Tess and Angela, sitting next to them, were equally engrossed in a chess game. From the looks of it, Angela was giving Tess fits. It looked like Tess's options were running out for saving her king. I was doing what I love doing the most lately, playing on my phone and watching TikTok videos. I was also checking out some new posts on Instagram that some of our friends in Code Club had recently posted. I decided to take a quick video of Tess getting her butt whooped in chess, because that didn't happen often. And I wanted to have it for future keeping. Tess was so fixated on the chessboard, she didn't see me filming her. I grinned and snickered to myself in a fake evil villain way as I hit the record button. Then it happened. A sound like the powerful rumbling of a race car engine could be heard steadily approaching in the distance. You could hear it shifting gears like it was barreling down a racetrack at top speed. It sounded like it was coming east on 7 Mile, heading our way toward the Sherwood intersection. I have been in love with race cars since before I can remember, and just the sound of this one had me completely jacked. Before I knew it, I was running toward the end of the lot toward Sherwood, where I knew I'd be able to see the car when it got to the intersection. I did not hear Uncle Bob and Aunt Ellen calling out to me frantically. By the time I got down to the end of the lot, the car was in the intersection, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. The sound of the engine was magnified. It seemed 10 times. The car was jet black, a Chevrolet Camaro with huge wheels in the back and multiple colored lights swirling around it like a spaceship. The windows were completely black, so you could not see the driver. Then it stopped suddenly in the intersection and began spinning literally like a top, faster and faster, tires squealing, and then it appeared to levitate a few inches from the ground and just hang there. As it did, the roaring engine kept getting louder and louder, and then just as suddenly as it had appeared in the intersection, with all that deafening noise, the car, along with all traces of lights and smoke, vanished. Traffic had completely stopped, and a few cars nearly collided. People were getting out of their cars and running toward the intersection where the roaring car had been. People had their phones out and were frantically talking about what they witnessed. All right, I'm going to stop there because, again, I want to honor the time and we want to hear everyone's pieces. But suffice it to say that this lends itself to probably one of the more interesting adventures that they've had since I've come up with these characters, TT and Tess. Keith?
Now you understand why I wish the Doc would read my piece. If I could only be that expressive when reading mine, we always say, Doc gets so graphic you can see everything happening right in front of you. But the piece that I have, let's see if I can get it here. There we go. The piece that I'm going to read from is called Simona. And Simona is actually a story that I wrote almost 30 years ago, back in 1986 or 87. When I was working in Ann Arbor. Actually, it was my first newspaper job in Ann Arbor. And the story Simona was one. I was working with a writing group there. We wrote different stories, different times, and the idea for Simona came to me about a young girl who was created by the union of a scientist and a computer, and it basically, but it's also has racial overtones because he basically created her to experiment on her. And that leads to a bunch of other complications. So I open up the story with the definition of eugenics, and then I'll go from there. Eugenics is the definition. Noun, the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. Developed largely by Sir Francis Galton as a method of improving the human race, eugenics was increasingly discredited as unscientific and racially biased during the 20th century, especially after the adoption of its doctrines by the Nazis in order to justify their treatment of Jews, disabled people, and other minority groups. I feel I am very close. The computer terminal at my home was originally designed to turn on and off in response to my desires. I could either flick the switch if I felt like remembering the old days, or I could voice activate the controls, but that was years ago. Since that time, I have become so confident in my creation that I designed the override program. This program was the first of its kind anywhere in the world and was widely regarded as the next step towards furthering the concept of supreme artificial intelligence. Although the various mathematical theories and computations that went into its making are more complex than most people care to be bothered with, the override program can be essentially described as follows: giving a man-made object the power to tell man what it will and will not do, based on what its own internal judgment factor deems to be the appropriate form of action. Though some of my more cautious colleagues have voiced concern that giving a computer the ability to overrule a decision made by a human being is dangerous, I am not worried. All risks hold the potential for danger, but without risk there is no chance for the necessary movement forward. And without that movement forward, there is no need for men like me. As for the argument presented by these so-called intellectuals that this high level of artificial intelligence could eventually eliminate the need for man, I find that ridiculous to the point that it is not deserving of the obvious and simple answer. The pursuit of high-level artificial intelligence is in no way motivated by a desire for self-destruction by machine, but rather by a yearning for the duplication and multiplication of intelligent life forms on this planet, which, I am sorry to say, are on the decline. Those who disagree need only look at the cancerous growth of this country's ghettos, whose inhabitants are throwbacks to the Stone Age. Just consider the plight of Detroit, where we currently reside. They have no capacity for enlightenment, yet their sheer numbers are dwarfing all signs of intelligent life on this planet. The meek are not inheriting the earth, the vermin are. If we are to survive, we must create that which is capable of storing our intelligence and passing it on so that our cities will continue to function properly. Without artificial intelligence, civilized society may soon become a vision of the past. It is essential that this project be kept secret for now, in order that the masses not detect the transition. Given the nature of man, no matter how inferior, he will never submit to the will of an artificially created human being. From the diary of Dr. Edward King, December 20th, 1973. Simone has disappeared. What? The girl, Simona, gone. There was a long silence before the voice snapped back over the receiver. I don't suppose you got any idea how long she's been gone, do you, Randy? Where she might have vanished to, perhaps? Wish I did, boss, but I don't have the slightest idea. Honest. 1 second she was right there on the screen in front of me. Then the next she was, well, just gone. Couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Randy's face was becoming taut. His eyes were focused hard on the video screen in front of him, which was the size of a portable television set. The screen framed a tiny room with a small cot in one corner and a few leaves scattered on the floor. This just might cost you your ass, Randy. You know that, my friend? This just might cost you your idiot ass. Randy's face winced as he distanced the receiver from his ear, then lowered it quietly to the smooth white table next to him. His eyes never left the screen. Damn, he whispered. Boss came down pretty hard on you, huh? Said Fred, a fair-skinned, wafer-thin, anxious-looking individual who was sitting next to Randy in front of another terminal looking as sympathetic as he could. What? Say, man, wake up, all right? That little girl's not coming back, so you might as well quit begging the screen. She's history, Randy. Randy stared into the terminal for nearly a minute before he closed his eyes and let himself fall back into his chair. With one tired motion of his hand, he pulled the wide-rim glasses from his face and tossed them onto the table next to the telephone. He drew a deep breath, then reopened his eyes. It just doesn't make sense to me, man, he said. True. I was looking right at the screen the whole time, right? You saw me. I never took my eyes off that screen, never. I know you didn't. I was watching too, remember? Randy was beginning to look dazed. Fred placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. Man, the only reason the boss hired us to do this mess is because he figured we were too stupid to figure out what he was up to. We're not supposed to understand, Randy, all right? We're just supposed to do, you know? If we do right, then we get our money. If not, they walk on us. And that's what just happened. We got walked on. And I'm going to read a little bit more just later because I'm running out of time. But that's the opening part. And what that is basically setting up is that Dr. King is one who basically views, obviously, African Americans inferior people. And so what he's trying to do is create, through a computer, an individual that he can experiment on to create a master race, which is what eugenics is about. And so he's creating Simona for that purpose. And so what's happened is, in this early scene, is that Simone has disappeared on her own. And none of them can figure out how that happened because she's not supposed to have free will. but now she's gone, and so they're trying to figure that out. So I'm going to move down a little bit so you can get more of a feel about what Simona, who Simona is, and that's just about, let's just pass this. There it, yeah, here it is, okay. So this is in Simona's voice. Yeah, I got a few more minutes. It has been almost a year now. For the past month, Daddy has kept me locked in this tiny room in the basement, except when he has tests he wants to run. They don't hurt, but if I were human, they would. What I don't like is not being able to go outside anymore. I miss seeing the trees and the people. I miss the talks I used to have with Daddy when we go out walking. She views Keen as her father, by the way. It was a good way to learn things, which is probably what he had in mind, but that's all right. At least we were outside and there was some sort of communication. All of that stopped when I told him that I looked like those faces in the window. Ever since then, he has been very cold towards me and seems to get quite upset when I call him Daddy, even though it was his idea. So why am I telling you this? It is not because of loneliness. Despite the fact that I look like I am human, I am not. I am synthetic and can in no way feel emotions, although I can usually duplicate the physical appearances that correspond with those emotions. It is not because of loneliness. I am telling you this because I think you should know. Goodbye. And let's see if I can get this part in. I'll read a little bit of this next part. The computer screen in Keen's home study flashed a bright blue as it hummed to life. Within seconds, words began marching silently across the surface. Are you there? Yes, please identify. It's me, Simona. So it is. Are you well? The question should first be asked of you. I have been concerned. You could not notify me sooner? I did the best I could and I'm fine. I transformed into an expanded matter state which allowed my form to pass through the walls. That's how I got out of the room. The aides think I just disappeared into thin air. Room? What room? You never told me about this room. Mommy, you're worrying too much. I can tell. I'm fine. I'm sorry. This is Simona talking to the computer, and the computer is her mother, and her mother's the one who helped her get out. Mommy, you're worrying too much. I can tell. I'm fine. Really. You know Daddy would never hurt me. He just likes to experiment with me sometimes. That's all. I know about the experiment, Simona, and I know your father even better. I know that he will be here soon, searching each data file in all of my memory banks until he can discover what happened during the creation phase that allowed you to disappear like you did. What do you mean, discover? I mean, he does not know that you have the ability to assume expanded matter. The words faded and the screen remained blank for nearly half a minute. The humming of the screen became louder. Simona, once again the screen faded. Simona, please respond. I thought my father created me. He did create you, but he needed my help to do it. No human could create a synthetic life form without the cooperation of a Vortex Replicon 3000 computer. I have told you this before. Yes, but you have never told me how a computer can insert an ability without the knowledge of the human. And I'll stop there.
Actually, as we move to Marsalis, I should have mentioned, Keith and I, we had a little bit of a competitive artificial intelligence theme going on. Mine deals, of course, with this autonomous car. His is Simona. So, and both of our stories are the first two. So, when you get a chance to read it, you let us know which one you think is. I think they kind of complement each other, actually. All right, Marsalis. Yes, absolutely. And I'll get the. In the meantime, you could give a little overview about your series, because this is your second focus on the 10 logs piece.
So this is the second in my 10 logs piece of. They're just logs like diary entries. The first one was called 10 Logs of El Dorado, which was about a group of futuristic Detroit engineers who were coming back, collecting something for car machinery, and an alien ended up infiltrating, and you see the deterioration of the ship in the first one. The second one involves the alien telling the story as they come back. They've assumed a human form, and nobody knows that the alien actually caused the accident. The alien's mission is to basically take over. So this is from the alien's perspective. This is, I'll do the first log, the first two logs. Log 1, August 16th, 2540. How foolish humans are, how utterly stupid. Their blind devotion to lies and deception, their fear of conjuring the truth. Anything could be expounded by anyone, and within moments, a trail of disciples would agree on its importance, without begging for an ounce of proof or confidence. To them, what is before their eyes bears the sum of reality, and that is how I got them on my side. The moment I arrived, bruised and battered, by my own hands, of course, there appeared a sea of sympathy emerging from their disgusting earthly faces, their sickened arms flailing toward me with kindness, and their foul mouths spouting words of encouragement and support. But once I spoke of what occurred on the El Dorado, this encouragement and support became monumental. It was magnificent, really, watching how intently their eyes stayed upon mine, listening to every gruesome detail, their mouths alternating between absolute horror and fierce fascination. It is like them, you know, to be so marveled by what they deeply hate. And as I produced that salty liquid from my lids, their marvel became complete. Within moments, all the masses, journalists, and heads of state began to cry also. It was a powerful yet ultimately silly scene, almost bringing myself to laughter. Yet I kept my emotional ruin perfected and accepted their rousing applause once I had finished my last sentence. Letting my head down, I felt their intense appreciation of my falsehoods, and down inside knew we had made the right decision to take them over. Soon after, I was swiftly introduced to some of the aforementioned heads of state, all of whom appear like small, anxious rabbits. Tomorrow there will be an event in my honor. I believe they mentioned a medal of honor, if you can imagine. You have saved our military from possible disaster, uttered one of the anxious rabbits. Oh, how little does he know. I write to you now from a very prominent home of one of their diplomats. They have set me up here until tomorrow when they have promised I am to be given some sort of prominent residence of my own. I must say, if anything, humans do know how to live comfortably. However, it has taken me everything not to eat one of them. I will perhaps eat one of the diplomat's dogs, although I am told they are not as delicious as the ones back home. Well, more tomorrow, my liege. I have become quite accustomed to these sleep cycles they appear so fond of. Yet the most important thing is that it has happened. It has been done, I am here within their borders, and I shall stay until there is no more. Okay, log 2, August 17th, 2540. My goodness, my liege, how easy this shall be. You should see the way they run this place, who they have in charge. It appears most of their governments, for starters, are run by those who are elected by the populace. Can you imagine such foolery? No wonder they're in such a pathetic state. How could anyone rely on the feelings of those who have no concept of rule or order? Also, those who are elected tend to appear, as I mentioned yesterday, like anxious rabbits. There's some kind of popular timidity that appeals to humans, I suppose, in which those who are physically weak and, most surprisingly, immensely aged are the ones who are given the reins to make the rules. How can one put faith in a being who does not even appear as if they could fend off a force on their own? What is the attraction in someone ready for death making decisions that will affect the entire populace? It is as if Earth has purposely set itself up for a takeover, if you must know the truth. It is as if they have been planning their own downfall with delicious and irresistible glee for centuries, eagerly anticipating the end of everything they called home. As the heads of state presented me with the Medal of Honor, they carried the most arrogant and braggadocious grins upon their faces, pleased with their sincerity and goodwill. Though obviously ignorant, they for a moment appeared to be somewhat decent creatures. But as we ate that cold, bland human food, these apparently respected leaders transformed into the horrendous monsters we have always expected. With their slopping mouths, drooling lips, and rolling eyes, they were like goblin babies killing their first hunger, sucking and breathing in all of which lay before them without care of what fell within their laps or upon the floor. It was at that precise moment that I realized they carried no dignity at all, and that their dominance throughout the universe had merely been a fluke. It would not last long, I told myself. It would not be much longer. And what happened after is what shall ensure our triumph. In addition to setting me up in a state of my own, these foolish humans have now appointed me a head position within their global military service. Although the exact title currently escaped me, all their arbitrary titles escape me, they claim that I have tremendous insight and an unwavering bravery that they have not seen in decades, and that apparently they could use such expertise at the top. Once again, I wanted to laugh, but grinned graciously instead. It was the same naive, unsophisticated act I put on with those fools on the El Dorado, but it seemed to work even greater upon these moronic rulers. Like all humans, they needed to feel good about the deeds they were doing. They needed that reassurance that they had done the right thing by giving the cute foreign girl a shot. I don't know how I can ever repay y'all, I told them, choking on fake tears. Just keep us safe from harm, one of them chuckled. Oh, I will, I then said, and they could not hear the lie. Yes, my liege, how easy this shall be.
So I'll have you know, when you were talking about all of the oldsters who were running the planet, I was like, ouch, ouch, ouch. So we've got two more pieces from our book. Keith, you go ahead and introduce those.
All right, the next piece we have, we had mentioned before, but we've been fortunate enough now we have back up a little bit. We've got most of our writers are from Detroit. Two things I didn't mention before. All the stories in Detroit Stories Quarterly have to have a Detroit theme of some sort. Have to have a Detroit theme of some sort, and that's one thing that's non-negotiable. Whatever the story is, it has to have something to do sometime with Detroit. Most of our authors are from Detroit or Detroit area, but that's not, we don't require that as long as the story. And this next author, Michael Dancher, is actually living in Florida, and he's written some number of stories for us. This is the second part of a series he's written called Nola's Bank Investigation. The conclusion is going to be in the next issue. And so this is Michael Dancher, and this is Nola's Bank Investigation Part 2. It's a really interesting story about just basically a bank heist, what happened with this bank heist in Detroit. I mentioned before, although most of our stories are science fiction, horror, alternative fiction, this is just a straight fiction story. It's really good. You're doing what? Nola had just told my dad about investigating a bank robbery. Thank God she waited until after eating and we were relaxing and digesting over spaghetti dinner in the living room. Chuck, I'm investigating a robbery at a bank owned by Scar's father. Nola was the only person I knew, other than my mother, who could get away with calling my father Chuck. He hated the blue-collar version of his given name and made it clear to everyone else that his name was either Charles or Dad. Do your parents know what you're doing? My dad knew this was a stupid question as soon as it left his mouth. Nola's parents could hardly keep tabs on their invalid son, Bad Bob. Their involvement and oversight of Nola's life stopped about 9 years before, when she was 7 or 8 years old. Forget I asked that, Nola. My dad didn't know which direction to take the conversation, so he turned toward me and asked, "Are you part of this Bronco?" Each time he was on offense, he called me by another made-up tough guy name. One time it would be Ace, another time it would be Spud or Hollywood. Instead of being offended, I actually enjoyed waiting to see what he came up with, because the names were usually funny. Bronco was creative enough to elicit a smile from me and a chuckle from Nola. Well, I guess I am. I'm helping Nola when she needs help. I took photographs of the vault and safe deposit box rooms where we were at, when we were at the bank. That's just great. The Federal Bureau of Investigation can't handle bank robberies, so they call in you two knuckleheads to solve these crimes. My father's sarcastic remark didn't surprise either of us. When he got backed into a corner, it was his way of defending himself and making a point. At least he thought he was making a valid point. And I should stop there and point out that Nola and everybody who's involved in this investigation our kids, our young people. I think Nola's about 15 years old, which is similar to Doc's story. Same thing with the GTN test. So part of the reason why everybody's so surprised is because they're wondering why in the world are they calling in kids to solve a bank robbery, but Nola's actually a genius. And that's what comes out of the story. Nola took over and gave my father a recap of the bank robbery and how we got involved. She made it clear that the scar asked for her help, and our first day at the bank produced some interesting clues. I could see my dad getting more and more interested as she told the entire story. When she got to the circular holes cut in the floor and the locks popped out of the steel doors of each safe deposit box slot, he was hooked. I could see the inquisitive mind of a tool and die maker trying to figure out how the robbers did these two things. Okay, tell me again, what is it you want me to do? Chuck, all you have to do is pose as a contractor for an hour or two at the Department of Water and Sewer. I need to get my hands on the blueprints showing the sewer system closest to the bank. And then we'll go to a couple of local real estate offices and pretend that you want to rent or buy a house close to the bank. I'll tell you exactly what street you want to rent or buy on. The entire thing shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 hours. Can I dress like this, or do I have to wear something else? My dad was asking if he could wear his normal day in and day out crappy work clothes. These clothes consisted of shabby and super baggy gray work pants and a white t-shirt with at least 3 holes and various paint stains. He lived in this outfit. If he thought Mom would look the other way, he would sleep in it and wear it to church. As a matter of fact, now that Aunt Bee was dead, my dad's clothes were the only thing they argued about. I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard, "Chuck, can't you find something better to wear?" Or, "Chuck, go upstairs and change. I'm not going if you dress like that." I need to say that I've heard similar things. Continuing to read. I'm afraid you'll have to wear something a little more distinctive. Nola didn't want to hurt my dad's feelings, so she used a word that wasn't critical and could be a code word for something stylish. You don't have to wear a suit and tie, but a pair of slacks and a nice shirt will fit the bill. Chuck, trust me, you'll live through this. In fact, I'll treat you to a banana split at Bodker's if you do this. My dad loved Bodker's ice cream, so Nola's bride was all it took to seal the deal. I'm in. When are we going to do this? Well, the sewer blueprint is first, so are you available either Friday morning or afternoon around 3 p.m.? Let's do it first thing in the morning, Nola. That way I can get to work and not waste the entire day. Plus, you and lunch meat over there need to get to school. When Nola and I stopped laughing at my dad's latest wise guy nickname for me, she said, "Mike, would you call Mr. Scarpelli and tell him we'll be at the bank Saturday morning? Also, call Smartass and see if the bread man can drive us there." I could tell my dad didn't understand why I would call Smartass to see if a car belonging to another kid was available. Whatever the reason, he shook his head and went back to watching and complaining about the news reported by Walter Cronkite. What neither of us guessed was he wasn't watching Walter. He was too busy worrying about the two of us and wondering if this was the way life would be if I married Nola. And I'll leave it there.
Very good. So our final piece, and we just jumped away from it, so I can recap it. Our final piece is from Abel Ramirez. And I need to say a few things about Abel before I read this. So those who know me, and everybody here, you know me, but then my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law of life, Pam, Keith, you all know I'm a man of God. Church is very important to me. Now, Abel, our beloved writer Abel, he's our horror writer, and I go far. He goes into the paranormal, the stuff that there was one piece that he did, because I think this is his 3rd or 4th piece for us. But there was one piece he did where, as Keith was reviewing it, he texted me in the middle of the night and said, "Man, this stuff is," and Pam, you know your husband. He said, "This stuff is dark as you know," when he used the S word. He said, "This, but it's really good." And he was right. He was absolutely right. So I'm qualifying that because as I do read this, I want to make the point that there's a real interesting quality in Abel's writing in that even though he writes about, horrific kinds of things, there's a redemptive quality that always emerges in his stories. This particular one that appears in our current issue, this is drawn from his series, The Raven's Gate Chronicles. And he actually has a book that's out on this topic. And the piece that I'm going to narrow in on is it's right when there's a protagonist he comes from Detroit, by the way, of course, and Ravens Gate is a city right outside of Detroit, a lot of ties with Detroit there. But there's some real weird goings on that are taking place in this one particular house. And so the investigator, his protagonist, is spending some time in this house to try to get to the bottom of what's going on. Also, there's a good friend of his who came from Detroit who ended up living in this house, and she's nowhere to be found. And so we pick up with the protagonist being right there. Yes.
If I can interrupt real quick. We have a bit of a surprise tonight. I think I mentioned before we have a Dr. John Telford in the house.
Yes.
And one of his stories is called The Reckoning. And since he's here, I asked him to read some from that tonight. So when Doc is due, we want to have him do a bit of a reading of that as well, since he's here to read his
Yes.
piece.
Yes.
From here? Or?
Yeah, I'll bring it over to you.
Yeah, we'll bring the microphone over to you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
All right, so real quickly. So to the right of the window on the wall adjacent to it was a closed door. I opened it. The fairly large closet was empty except for a naked, armless upper torso of a female mannequin that sat on the floor. She had pink plastic skin, her head was bald and turned to the left, and she stared into space. The temperature dropped in the dusty attic, suddenly became cold. A draft, maybe? I shut the closet door, leaving the mannequin shrouded in darkness, then headed downstairs to turn in early for the night. I turned off the attic light when I reached the bottom of the steps and shut the attic door. An hour later, I lay in the guest room bed, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling in the dark. The house was foreign and still took some getting used to. Sleep finally took over, but I was awakened by a sound. A heavy creak came from the ceiling above, like the one I heard when Sandy showed me the house. Another creak followed. Someone was walking in the attic. I sprang from the bed and grabbed my sidearm, which I kept in the dresser drawer. I ran into the hall, pulled open the attic door, and turned on the light switch before running up. As I stood at the top of the stairs facing the large attic, everything seemed fine, but only for a second. "Who's up there?" I said. The light bulb that hung from the ceiling flared, then went out, leaving everything in the dark. Perfect timing. Light from the room rushed through the circular window, illuminating a small portion of the attic, but it was still too hard to see. I paused, waiting for movement of any kind. Nothing. I quickly grabbed the mag light near the railing next to the steps, turned it on and shined the beam around the room. Slowly I threaded through my old furniture and jumped. Anybody could have been hiding in all that clutter. My eyes slowly adjusted. Maybe a raccoon? The silhouette appeared in darkness, and it stepped from behind the closet that contained the torso. I aimed the flashlight in her direction. She was gone. "Sandy?" I called. I ran to the spot where I saw the woman in front of the window and shined the light around. No one was there. Nothing but the window and the closet. I'll leave it there. Abel's stuff is scary. Just a warning. You read his stuff. Dean Koontz, is very similar to that. It's like you got to keep the lights on. All right, go ahead. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Okay, speak your say.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Everybody hear me?
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start. This short story is called The Reckoning. Actually, it's a true story. Lorenzo grew up almost completely when he turned 15 in the summer of 1951. His growth wasn't a physical phenomenon, although he attained a man's size that year. It was an experience, a bad one, that grew him up so quickly. He hadn't lived in the neighborhood long, perhaps a month or two, so he had attended the neighborhood school for only a few weeks before summer vacation. That had been time enough to prove he could fight and to teach the bullies his own age to keep their hands off him. It had been time enough to demonstrate that he had a quick tongue and a way with the girls, but hardly enough time to make lasting attachments based upon mutual trust. The nights were hot that summer. Teenagers would stay away from the oppressive heat of their homes as late as they dared, several gathering together around the grounds of the neighborhood school to sit in what little breeze there was to talk and joke in the darkness. One particularly stifling night, there were more young people than usual down at the school. Ronald Harris was there, proudly wearing his Naval Reserve uniform for everyone to see. He was no bigger than the other boys there, but he was older, 19. And they envied his uniform, his years, and his sophistication. Janetta Haywood and her sister were there too. Janetta and Lorenzo had eyes for each other for some time, and each was acutely conscious of the other's proximity on this particular night. Janetta was admiring Ronald's uniform in the indistinct glow of the streetlight cast from the corner, and Lorenzo was jealous. "That's nothing but a play suit, man," he spoke up to Ronald for Janetta's benefit. "You're a little bit old to be wearing a sailor suit. Can't you get your mama to dress you in something more grown up?" Janetta laughed a beautiful, delighted laugh at Lorenzo's wit. Irked as much by Janetta's laughter as by Lorenzo's words, Ronald snapped back, "You watch your mouth, boy, or I'll whip you like I was your daddy. You'll never see the day you're big enough to fit inside this uniform. This uniform is for men only." It looked like a Boy Scout suit to me. "You sure you ain't from the Sea Scouts?" In the semi-darkness, Lorenzo didn't see Ronald's fist lash out until it was almost in his face. Suddenly he was sitting on the ground, yellow and orange lights flashing behind his eyes. He had never been hit so hard in his life. It seemed as though he had been on the ground much longer than a few seconds. "Get up, boy," Ronald commanded, standing above him with clenched fists. Lorenzo succeeded in focusing his eyes and saw Ronald's knees, his legs planted firmly in front of him. Ronald's voice repeated the command. Lorenzo got up. Again he was knocked down, but this time the lights behind his eyes didn't flash so wildly. His head remained clear. He regained his feet and put his hands up. Seeing the older boy close in to hit him again, he turned and ran. Blindly, impulsively, in panic, he fled, not stopping until he was all the way home. Ronald had not pursued him. For a full year after that incident, Lorenzo relived it in his dreams. Many things happened during that year. Ronald Harris went into the Navy. Lorenzo himself won a considerable local reputation as an amateur boxer. But still he relived the schoolyard fight almost every night. In his dream he would get up and fight instead of run. And he would beat Ronald, Janetta cheering him on. But each morning he was condemned to awaken and live through the day with the intolerable fact that he had run away. It was during those interminable days that he became obsessed with the idea of a reckoning with Ronald, to even the count and redeem himself. Many times he envisioned the scene, the schoolyard at night, Janetta there, the others all there, and Ronald there in his Navy uniform. He would walk up to Ronald and knock him to the ground and stand over him, daring him to get up. When Ronald got up, he would knock him down again and again and again. Lorenzo passed his 16th birthday and began winning Golden Gloves bouts as a welterweight. 5, 6 straight he won. His picture appeared in the paper twice. He read everything about Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis that he could get his hands on. He began wearing his hair like Sugar Ray. At 17, he grew into a middleweight and kept on winning. Every time he threw a punch, Ronald was his target. He won 11, 12. He avoided Janetta. Several times she tried to seek him out in the hall at school, on the street, once even in the gym where he trained. But he treated her coldly, ashamed for her to see him, unable to forget the encounter with Ronald and that she had witnessed it. 4 years passed before he finally saw Ronald Harris again. Ronald was standing at the edge of the same schoolyard, watching some small boys and girls play a game of softball. Lorenzo had just graduated from high school. Ronald had just been discharged from the Navy. The scene was not as Lorenzo had imagined or hoped it would be. It was day, not night. Janetta had been married for almost a year, and she had a little baby. No one who had been there that night was there now except for him and Ronald. Yet all the bitter shame came back to engulf him nonetheless. There had been times when he had feared Ronald would never come home, and this moment of reckoning would forever escape him. Now that it was finally here, he felt calm as he approached Ronald, awaiting some sign of recognition. None came. Ronald barely glanced at him, then returned his attention to the children's game. "Nice day, isn't it?" Lorenzo remarked to Ronald, trying to get him to look back at him. Ronald regarded him impersonally. "Yes, it is. Nice day for the kids to play ball. Almost makes you wish you were a little kid again. Say, man, don't you remember me?" Ronald looked at Lorenzo more closely. After several seconds, he said, "Why, no, I'm afraid I can't quite place you. Where do I know you from?" "From right here on this field, 4 years ago. It was night, remember? You had a sailor suit on." Ronald's eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, yes, I do remember now. You were the young cat who..." "That's right." Lorenzo reached out and slapped Ronald hard across the face. "You guessed it. Now, man, what do you want to go and do that for? That was a long time ago. Let's forget it." "We're not going to forget it. You're going to fight or not?" "You're acting like a kid." Ronald saw Lorenzo's left hand coming, and he raised his fist to defend himself. Lorenzo's fast right hand is what Ronald didn't see. The next thing Ronald knew, he was lying full length on the ground. "Get up, man." Lorenzo loosened his shoulder muscles in anticipation. Slowly, Ronald got up, and Lorenzo put him down again with his most effective combination. Two quick left hooks and an overhand right. Blood streamed from Ronald's nose. He licked the blood off his lips and rose from his feet again unsteadily. The children had stopped playing ball and had come running to watch the two young men fight. Lorenzo hit Ronald hard in the stomach, and Ronald went down. This time he did not attempt to rise. A little girl ran to him and knelt. "Uncle Ronald, oh, he's bleeding." She looked up at Lorenzo with anger and fear in her face. "You hurt him. Leave my uncle alone." Lorenzo took a step backward, looking at Ronald lying there helpless. His vengeful, obsessive rage vanished. He felt curiously ungratified, cheated. The child had begun to cry. Was this the moment he had awaited so long? "I guess I made a mistake," Lorenzo muttered. "It was too long ago. I'm sorry." Standing there over the fallen man and the frightened girl, he felt like a bully, and he was as ashamed as he had been on that night 4 years before. "It was just too long ago," he repeated ineffectually, wishing that Ronald's profuse bleeding would stop. "I'm sorry, man," he said. I really am."
Well, we thank you all. We've got a few minutes before we close out.
You can take as long as you want.
And we just want to say thank you for coming out here. We're at Book Suey, and we're here in Hamtramck, and just have so much gratitude to share these stories and to have them here always, but the most immense gratitude to have you here live with us. It feels good to be back. Thank you, everyone. We're open every weekend.
Thank you very much. Well, any further comments?